Detroit, Michigan, March 23, 1963, 11:30 p.m. The phone rings in Sugar Ray Robinson's Grosse Pointe mansion, shattering his sleep with the words every husband dreads. Your wife has been in a serious car accident. 25 minutes later, he bursts through the emergency doors of St. Vincent's private medical center, still in pajamas under his overcoat, his heart pounding harder than it ever did in Madison Square Garden. He can think only of Edna May, the woman who stood by him through every fight, every victory, every challenge life threw at a black boxing champion in America. But when Dr. Harrison Wells examines his insurance card and declares, "Your insurance doesn't cover this level of care," what happens in the next 3 hours doesn't just save one woman's life, it exposes how American healthcare rations treatment based on race, not need. St. Vincent's Private Medical Center rises from Grosse Pointe, like a fortress of healing reserved for Detroit's elite. Georgian brick architecture, manicured gardens, valet parking where Cadillacs and Lincolns arrive, carrying patients whose wallets guarantee the finest medical care money can buy. Inside, marble lobbies showcase oil paintings of founding physicians, while crystal chandeliers cast expensive light over Persian rugs. This is where automotive executives receive heart surgery, where banking presidents recover from strokes, where your life gets saved or lost based not on medical urgency, but on insurance policies that determine who deserves premium healthcare. Robinson burst through the emergency entrance at 11:55 p.m., his heart pounding harder than it ever did in Madison Square Garden. Behind the reception desk, Night Supervisor Margaret Crawford looks up with surprise and immediate wariness. A black man in pajamas and overcoat, running into their exclusive hospital after midnight, represents exactly the kind of emergency situation that tests institutional policies designed to maintain patient demographics. "My wife," Robinson gasps, still catching his breath from the sprint from parking lot to entrance. "Edna May Robinson. Car accident. The paramedics said they brought her here." Crawford checks her admission logs with practiced efficiency. "Mrs. Edna May Robinson, admitted 11:20 p.m. Critical condition, surgery required." She pauses, examining Robinson's appearance, making calculations about his ability to pay for emergency medical services at Detroit's most expensive hospital. Can you imagine the terror coursing through Robinson's body? His wife fighting for her life while administrative staff evaluate his insurance coverage instead of rushing him to her bedside. "Sir, I'll need to see your insurance documentation before we can discuss treatment options," Crawford says with institutional authority that prioritizes paperwork over human crisis. Robinson fumbles for his wallet with shaking hands, pulling out insurance cards, credit cards, cash, anything that might eliminate barriers between him and his dying wife. "Here's my insurance. Here's my American Express. I can pay whatever it costs. Just tell me how she is." Dr. Harrison Wells approaches from the surgical wing, still wearing green scrubs, his hands recently washed from emergency procedures. 48 years old, chief of surgery, expert at delivering life and death news to families who can afford St. Vincent's premium medical services. His expression carries the gravity of someone who has spent the last 30 minutes trying to save a human life. "Mr. Robinson," Wells says with practiced clinical compassion, "your wife has suffered severe internal injuries, ruptured spleen, internal bleeding, possible brain trauma. She requires immediate surgery, intensive care, possibly weeks of recovery with round-the-clock monitoring." The medical information hits Robinson like physical blows. Ruptured spleen, internal bleeding, brain trauma. Words that describe his wife's body broken and fighting for survival in an operating room, where strangers hold her life in their hands. Picture the desperation of a man, hearing his soulmate described in medical terminology that reduces love to damaged organs and surgical procedures. "Do whatever it takes," Robinson says, without hesitation. "Any surgery, any treatment, any equipment she needs. Money is no object. Save my wife." Wells examines Robinson's insurance documentation with the thoroughness of someone accustomed to managing expensive medical procedures. The insurance policy is legitimate, comprehensive, expensive, the kind purchased by successful Americans seeking premium healthcare protection. But there's a problem that transcends Robinson's ability to pay, or his insurance coverage. A problem rooted in hospital policies that separate patients by race, regardless of their medical needs or financial capacity. "Mr. Robinson," Wells says carefully, "your insurance coverage is substantial, but St. Vincent's provides specialized care that may not be fully covered under standard policies. We need to verify coverage limits before proceeding with extensive treatment protocols." Coverage limits, treatment protocols, the euphemisms that delay life-saving medical care, while administrators calculate profit margins on human suffering. What Wells doesn't realize is that he's not just practicing medicine, he's gatekeeping access to healthcare based on racial assumptions about insurance quality and payment reliability that have nothing to do with Robinson's actual coverage or ability to pay. Dr. Wells, Robinson says, his voice gaining strength despite his fear. I don't care about coverage limits. I'll pay cash for any treatment your insurance won't cover. I'll mortgage my house, sell my businesses, liquidate my investments, whatever it costs to save my wife's life. The offer to pay unlimited cash should eliminate any financial concerns about providing emergency medical care. But Wells still hesitates, not because of money, but because of institutional policies about treating black patients in facilities designed for white clientele. Can you feel the moral weight crushing down in that hospital lobby? A husband offering everything he owns, while medical professionals debate administrative policies instead of saving his wife's life? Sir, it's not simply about payment, Wells continues. St. Vincent's maintains specific treatment protocols, specialized care standards, patient accommodation arrangements that may not be appropriate for all demographic groups. Patient accommodation arrangements, demographic groups, the language that makes medical segregation sound like personalized healthcare instead of racial discrimination. This is where Robinson's patience breaks, not from anger, but from moral clarity that cuts through medical euphemisms like a scalpel. Dr. Wells, Robinson says, his voice carrying the authority of someone who has faced life-and-death moments. My wife is bleeding to death in your operating room, while you discuss demographics and accommodation arrangements. Are you telling me that her race matters more than her life? The question echoes through the marble lobby like a prayer demanding divine justice, forcing everyone present to confront the humanity behind medical policies that prioritize social comfort over surgical necessity. But then something unexpected happens that changes the entire crisis. Dr. Sarah Mitchell enters the lobby from the surgical wing, having heard raised voices while reviewing patient charts. 44 years old, head of emergency medicine, 20 years saving lives without regard for patients' insurance status or racial background. She recognizes Robinson immediately and understands the situation's urgency. Mr. Robinson, Mitchell says with genuine medical authority, your wife is in surgery now. We're doing everything possible to save her life. The next few hours are critical, but she's receiving the finest emergency care available. The medical update from a doctor focused on patient care rather than administrative policies creates immediate relief for Robinson's terror about his wife's condition. Dr. Mitchell, Robinson responds with gratitude. Dr. Wells was explaining insurance complications and treatment protocols. I need to know that Edna May is receiving every possible medical intervention regardless of cost or coverage limitations. Mitchell looks between Robinson and Wells, with growing understanding of the administrative barriers being created during a medical emergency. Mr. Robinson, Mitchell says with professional authority that cuts through institutional hesitation, your wife is receiving identical emergency care that we would provide to any patient with her injuries. Surgery is underway. Our surgical team is excellent. Insurance discussions can wait until after we save her life. Can you imagine the power of medical ethics trumping administrative prejudice? One doctor choosing patient care over institutional policies. But Mitchell isn't finished establishing medical priorities over racial considerations. Dr. Wells, she continues with barely concealed criticism, emergency medical care doesn't depend on insurance verification or demographic considerations. We save lives first, handle paperwork afterward. That's medical ethics, not hospital administration. The professional reprimand from the head of emergency medicine creates pressure on Wells to prioritize medical care over administrative barriers that delay treatment based on racial assumptions. The surgery continues for 2 hours while Robinson paces the waiting room, praying to every god he's ever heard of, making bargains with the universe to save the woman who made his life complete. Other hospital staff begin recognizing him, whispering about the famous boxer whose wife is fighting for her life in their operating theater. At 2:30 a.m., Dr. Mitchell emerges from surgery still wearing surgical scrubs, her expression carrying the weight of someone who has spent 2 hours battling death and winning.
Så det fadnaks både säger förfigas Mr. Baird, has your prostis your trim is eras. Hadis a betard per spamtidis pisa than ermo bleeding. Hadis plodid poffadet hasbrot sichert, tespaltably suma patas pifa the entossis.
The medical news hits Robinson like salvation itself. Survival, recovery. His wife will live to laugh with him again, to share dreams and fears and the ordinary miracles of married life that seemed impossible an hour ago. But Mitchell adds crucial information about ongoing treatment requirements. The recovery process will be lengthy, intensive care, specialized monitoring, rehabilitation services. Your insurance should cover standard care, but some advanced treatments may require additional authorization or payment arrangements. The mention of payment arrangements brings Wells back into the conversation with renewed focus on financial, rather than medical considerations. Mr. Robinson, Wells interjects, St. Vincent's intensive care represents the finest medical technology available. The daily costs are substantial, and insurance companies sometimes question extended care for certain patient populations. Certain patient populations, the euphemism that suggests black patients receive different insurance consideration than white patients with identical medical needs. Robinson realizes the battle for his wife's life has shifted from surgical to administrative, from medical emergency to racial gatekeeping disguised as insurance policy interpretation. Dr. Wells, Robinson says with quiet determination, I want to clarify something. My wife will receive every medical treatment, every technological intervention, every care service that St. Vincent's provides to any patient with her condition. I will personally guarantee payment for any treatment that insurance questions or denies. The personal financial guarantee eliminates any legitimate concerns about payment for medical services. But Wells continues raising obstacles based on hospital policies rather than medical needs. Mr. Robinson, it's not simply about individual payment, hospital policies, insurance relationships, regulatory compliance. There are complex considerations beyond personal financial capacity. Hospital policies, regulatory compliance, the administrative language that preserves racial barriers to healthcare while maintaining plausible legal defensibility. This is where Robinson's moral authority becomes overwhelming, where individual dignity confronts institutional discrimination in life and death medical context. Dr. Wells, Robinson says with devastating clarity, my wife nearly died tonight. You saved her life through excellent surgery. Now you're suggesting that her race affects her access to recovery care despite my ability and willingness to pay for identical treatment provided to white patients. Is that St. Vincent's medical policy? The direct question forces Wells to acknowledge what everyone present understands, that racial considerations rather than medical needs are influencing treatment decisions for Robinson's wife. Dr. Mitchell steps into the confrontation with professional authority that prioritizes medical ethics over administrative discrimination. Dr. Wells, she says with surgical precision, Mrs. Robinson will receive identical intensive care provided to any patient with her medical needs. Her insurance coverage is excellent. Her husband's payment guarantee is unlimited. Her medical requirements are clear. Administrative policies that create different care standards based on race violate medical ethics and hospital accreditation standards. The ethical challenge from head of emergency medicine creates professional pressure on Wells to provide equal medical care regardless of racial considerations that have no legitimate medical justification. What happens next demonstrates how medical advocacy can overcome administrative barriers when healthcare professionals prioritize patient care over institutional prejudice. Mitchell personally supervises Robinson's wife's transfer to the intensive care unit, ensuring she receives identical monitoring, medication, and nursing attention provided to all critical patients. Her intervention establishes medical rather than administrative authority over treatment decisions. The intensive care stay extends for 8 days, during which Robinson maintains bedside vigil while his wife recovers slowly but steadily from surgery and trauma. Every day brings improvement measured in vital signs, consciousness, and gradual return to the woman he loves. Medical staff begin recognizing that Robinson's presence improves rather than complicates patient care. His devotion to his wife, his respectful interaction with nurses, his gratitude for medical interventions create positive atmosphere that enhances rather than threatens hospital environment. Other patients' families notice Robinson's dignity during medical crisis. His example of grace under pressure, dedication to family, and appreciation for healthcare professionals creates admiration rather than resentment from white families sharing hospital facilities. The successful medical outcome validates Dr. Mitchell's approach of prioritizing patient care over administrative barriers. Robinson's wife recovers completely. Their insurance covers all standard treatments, and additional costs are managed through Robinson's personal payments without financial hardship. National medical journals begin featuring articles about racial barriers to healthcare and the importance of medical ethics in treatment decisions. Robinson's experience becomes case study in how administrative policies can interfere with emergency medical care. Progressive hospitals across the country begin reviewing their admission and treatment policies to ensure equal medical care regardless of patient race or insurance assumptions about coverage quality. Medical ethics rather than administrative convenience becomes primary consideration. The psychological impact on Robinson's family proves profound when they realize that excellent medical care was nearly denied based on racial assumptions rather than medical needs or ability to pay for treatment. Robinson understood something powerful during those 3 hours at St. Vincent's Hospital. Sometimes the most important fights aren't in boxing rings or business offices. They're in medical facilities where healthcare gets rationed by racial policies rather than medical needs. The victory wasn't just about receiving equal medical treatment. It was about proving that healthcare is a human right that transcends racial boundaries when medical ethics guides treatment decisions rather than administrative prejudice. Think about healthcare access in your community. Medical institutions that claim equal treatment while maintaining barriers based on demographics rather than medical needs or ability to pay for services. Because 3 hours of demanding equal healthcare can change medical policies forever, can prove that medical ethics must prioritize patient care over racial considerations that have no legitimate medical justification. Robinson didn't just save his wife's life that night. He proved that medical care belongs to everyone who needs it, regardless of race. When healthcare professionals choose medical ethics over administrative discrimination, that threatens rather than protects patient welfare. The ripple effects of Robinson's hospital confrontation extend far beyond one medical emergency. Healthcare advocacy organizations begin using his experience as example of how racial bias infiltrates medical decision-making, even in life-threatening situations. Medical schools incorporate the Robinson case into their ethics curriculum, teaching future doctors about the importance of prioritizing patient care over administrative policies that can delay or deny treatment based on demographics rather than medical need. The emotional trauma of nearly losing his wife to administrative delays rather than medical complications stays with Robinson for years. He becomes advocate for healthcare equality, using his platform to highlight how racial assumptions affect medical care across American hospitals.